Hello, and welcome to episode 74 of Public Interest Podcast with your host, Jordan Cooper, where we interview politicians, activists, advocates, and others who seek to improve the state of the world. We are here today with Montgomery County Council member Roger Berliner, who represents District 1 in Montgomery County. Roger, how are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you, Jordan?
Excellent. The first thing I'd like to ask you is, what are you currently doing, or what have you ever done to advance the public interest, and why?
Well, what I'm doing right now, I have the privilege of serving as chairman of the Council of Governments for the entire region. And our top priority for this entire year has been working on Metro and trying to help our new general manager give him the support he needs to be successful. And it's a daunting task because you have a region with disparate interests. You have two states and the District of Columbia and the federal government involved, and there's no question that this is an organization that will need more resources. So I've tried to lead an effort that will hopefully produce dedicated funding for Metro in 2018.
And for our listeners who don't know, what's the problem with Metro in D.C.?
Well, the problem with Metro is basically we underinvested in the system as we do underinvest in our infrastructure generally.
Why do we underinvest?
Because we don't see it as, it isn't crumbling before our very eyes. Now Metro has crumbled before our very eyes, and we're paying the consequences of it. Plus, we do have a governance structure in which we've had a lot of political figures who simultaneously serve on the board of directors and represent their own constituencies. And generally, sometimes politicians want to avoid long-term issues that could cost them in the short term. So things weren't taken care of that would have required sacrifice before, and it led us down this spiral.
Sounds like the political system, as you describe it, relating to the Washington Metro Area Transit Authority, WMATA, really incentivizes short-term planning as opposed to at the expense of long-term planning, because it sounds like a lot of the political expenses and rewards are incurred in the short term with elections and re-elections of the elected officials sitting on the board, and that long-term investments, the rewards of long-term investments may come when the politicians in office who make those sacrifices are long out of office and no longer able to reap the benefits of having made those tough decisions. Is that a fair assessment?
I think it is. I think it's difficult to be a fiduciary, if you will, to a system, and at the same time have a political base that you feel you must take care of. And if that political base was hurt by decisions you made for the long-term interest of the system, there'd be consequences. So it's one of the issues that now has come to the forefront as we talk about WMATA's future. Do we also look at the governance structure in addition to its financial needs, while this new general manager really is terrific? Jordan, this new general manager came in and said, we're not doing it the same old way. I'm going to shut down the system with only hours of notice because I was told there was something that was not safe. He did something that was really off the charts, and he set the signal that this is no nonsense, this is about safety first, and then we will take care of reliability. And so my hat's off to him, and I want to support him.
Because there have been some deaths, haven't there been?
There have been some deaths. There had been some deaths, and we've lost 100,000 riders from the peak of the system. And there are people that are concerned about being in a death spiral. We have to get this system up and running, safe and reliable, and in a manner in which actually customer service now becomes far more important.
And you mentioned that there are jurisdictional issues dealing with different counties in Virginia, counties in Maryland, the state governments of the two states, and then, of course, the municipal Washington, D.C. government, which the U.S. Congress has jurisdiction over, so to some extent. So is that, how are you dealing with those challenges when you speak about improving the governance structure of Metro?
Well, one of the issues is that there's what's called a jurisdictional veto. So here we have a situation where the general manager has said, I need more time on the tracks, which means I need to close the system at 11:30 Monday through Thursday. Well, the District of Columbia is concerned about impact on its restaurant business. Or the general manager says, I have a new budget, it's a shared sacrifice budget, and I'm going to raise rates, fares, by a quarter on bus routes. And the District of Columbia says, I don't want my people having to pay another quarter for bus fares. And they could assert their jurisdictional veto and deny it. So it is that dynamic that makes it so difficult. Should we have jurisdictional vetoes? I don't know whether that actually serves our community going forward.
It sounds like almost democracy gone awry. Every player gets a voice.
Well, but every player is contributing to the system. And so if several jurisdictions said, oh, I want this, I want this, I want this, and sort of ignored the other jurisdictions' needs, then you would say, well, gosh, I'm being outvoted all the time.
Sure.
So finding that right balance is very difficult. And so it requires really using that authority very discreetly and very sparingly, not always playing that card.
So how do we, because obviously there are other areas across the economy, across society, across Montgomery County where you are an elected official, where you find yourself as a politician or other politicians find themselves trying to weigh the cost-benefit analysis of short-term versus long-term. Even in financial markets, you have a lot of companies who are trying to meet the quarterly goals at the expense potentially of long-term stability and returns. How do you balance priorities as an elected official, or how do you redesign incentives in a political system to ensure that long-term sustainability is prioritized?
Well, I think a lot of it has to be, are you prepared not to be in office? I have never thought of myself as a, quote, office holder. That is somebody who has to hold office. So if you are prepared to say, I'm doing this as a public service, I enjoy it, I'm enlivened by it, I actually feel I'm pretty good at it, but I will be called upon to make decisions that are unpopular.
Right.
And you have to be prepared to make decisions that are unpopular, and if the voters say that is simply too much for us, then guess what? Then you move on to the next phase of your life. And if you're not willing to do that, then everything would be dominated by short-term considerations, re-election.
Interesting. There's a lot of substance you brought up there. I'm thinking, on the one hand, what did it take to become elected? And it seems if you're willing to make the right choices, you almost would have to let go of the investments that you and others have made in your political career. On the other hand, you also, why don't you respond to that? So what does it take to get into office and then to realize, look, I potentially have to be ready to let go?
Well, my own path was that I got involved in Capitol Hill when I was still in college. And basically did that work and worked for the Carter administration, worked for the California state legislature, worked as a legislative director to a United States senator, and worked as a legislative aide to the United States House of Representatives. I loved it. It was just enthralling. I got involved at the height of Watergate in 1972.
Interesting. So when trust in the public sector and elected officials was at its nadir, you really found that was where you entered politics. How did that affect you?
Well, what affected me was watching the figures rise to the occasion in the Congress at that time and how they did their work. And there were people that just really became big in this job. And when I worked on Capitol Hill, there were big figures who you might disagree with, but you would play tennis with, that there were relationships. And so I really was thrilled with the opportunity to serve at that time. But then I let that go after 10 years and got married and had a law firm and was
You moved 3,000 miles away.
Was fortunate to be successful and actually moved back here and had a nice law firm and enjoyed my practice. But I got to a place in my life where I said, I really think that this is who I am, that I am someone who would do well as a legislator. I am, my DNA, I'm a legislator.
It's like a calling. It's something you were meant to do.
I felt that was true, and so I had to find out. And so I would not have been satisfied, if you will, going to my grave, not standing in that space and finding out if this is something that was true.
It's so interesting, though, that if it's a part of your identity to, this is really where your strengths are accentuated. You're holding town halls on infrastructure. You're going out there at 8 p.m. to a town hall meeting with 8 people in a public library, and that really is what gets you going. You never find someone who says, gosh, I really want to be a surgeon, and they go to school and they go to med school and they do residency and they become a surgeon, and then halfway through their career as a surgeon they say, I have to be ready to make the tough decisions and stop being a surgeon and give up my calling. It's so intrinsic to my identity. I am a surgeon. I see myself as a healer who really helps people, and I have to make a tough call to say, no longer will I ever be a surgeon. I have to make the right decision and make a tough call, and as a consequence of that, and that's the analogy. As a politician, it's who you are, yet you always have to be willing to let go and do something that isn't really you. How do you deal with that?
So I've never considered myself a politician first.
Okay.
I love the work of government. I love doing this work, and I have to turn to the people and say, do you like my work? Here's what I've done, and if you like it, then I really would love to do it more. Mm-hmm. And I'm prepared to do that on making unpopular decisions and say, okay, here's what I am, and if you like what I've done, and if you think that what I bring to this work is valuable, I'd love to do it some more. But I'm at the stage in life where, my goodness, if I'm not prepared to say no and to do something else, then shame on me. You can't hold on to this, because then you become someone who basically will sacrifice what you think in your heart is the right thing to do for a few votes going forward.
Do you have any personal political mentors from all that time in the U.S. Congress and the Sacramento legislature who helped give you a sense of how you ought to conduct yourself as a public figure?
Well, I was really blessed to work for Henry Waxman, who's arguably one of the best congressmen ever to serve in the United States House of Representatives, and Senator Howard Metzenbaum, and I served as his legislative director. And Howard Metzenbaum came in every day and he'd say to me, Roger, what do you got for me? He loved every day being a senator, and if you didn't have something for him, he would let you know about it. So I've tried to carry that sense of activism into my work, of really embracing what is it that we get a chance to do. Mm-hmm. And particularly, as I've found, local government really matters the most. You touch people's lives the most. I don't care. When there was an opportunity to run for Congress, people knocked on my door and said, would you be interested in running for Congress? I go, no, are you kidding me? To be in that dysfunction? No, when I have a chance for 1 million people to help shape a community, right now we're going through painful land use decisions, but look at Bethesda and the opportunity, if we can get this right, to really make Bethesda even a hotter destination.
Right.
You don't get those opportunities very often, so
you did mention something about Waxman, and by the way, Henry Waxman is a congressman from New York.
No, he's from Los Angeles.
Oh, he's from Los Angeles, and the senator was from
Ohio.
Ohio. Okay, sorry about that.
It's okay.
So Waxman, you defined as one of the best congressmen ever to have been in the House of Representatives.
Yes.
What are some of your metrics that you use to assess how great a politician he has been?
Effectiveness. He was effective when they were in the majority, and he was effective when they were in the minority.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he just was dogged
Mm-hmm.
in what he took on, and his staff was with him for 20, 25 years.
So that he inspires loyalty.
He inspired great loyalty.
Yes.
And really knew how to get things done, important things done.
Mm-hmm.
Clean Air Act, important things.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that's what this is about, is trying to create a context in which you can really make things happen for your residents that are meaningful.
But as opposed to Waxman, who would have the Clean Air Act affecting the entire United States, but kind of when you talk to an individual person, how has your day been made better today because of the Clean Air Act? It's not as direct a causal link as, say, your position where you say, well, I'm a county council member, how's your day been better because your kid is in a brand new school that has a lower ratio with the students to teachers, or that, it's safer streets and sidewalks. And, so you enjoy having a more direct impact on people's lives where they can actually point and say, Roger did that.
Yes. I mean, when we do I take great pride in our constituent service.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm blessed to represent what many people would say is one of the most powerful political subdivisions in the United States of America. District 1 with Bethesda, Chevy Chase, Potomac, etc. You look at the people that are living there. It's really quite an extraordinary district and political subdivision. And it's a demanding political subdivision because these are people that expect things to work well, and they expect you to be working hard for them. And so it really demands a lot of my team and my staff. But when we can deliver for them and put in that stop sign, make life better for them, it's deeply gratifying.
Now, in speaking about the particulars of your constituency, you represent some of the wealthiest and most well-educated Americans in the country.
Yep.
And, it makes someone stop and think, if you are not rewarded by voters for making decisions that advance the long-term interest here, where would you be rewarded for that? Because you spoke earlier, I'm willing to make tough decisions that may cost me votes, but I believe it's in the long-term best interest of our community. But if in the most educated constituency, you find that it may be possible that the electorate doesn't recognize or doesn't vote for what is in the long-term interest of the community, how do you reconcile yourself to that, I guess, ubiquitous reality in politics?
All you can do is the best you know how. And you have to be willing to let go. Life is about holding on, knowing when to hold on, and knowing when to let go. Right?
Have you ever let go of something before?
Oh, yes. And so you need to know when it's time to let go, or you need to let people decide that, this is democracy. They get to decide. I serve at the pleasure of others. And if my view is not theirs, they get to decide who serves them. So I'm okay with democracy.
So how did that time when you did let go, what filled that void? What happened when you if you have a particular example to share?
Well, I've been pretty blessed in my life that when I've let go, if you will, it's that wonderful saying, when one door closes, another opens. Okay? If you have faith in yourself and you're good at what you do, I will have plenty of opportunities. You will have plenty of opportunities to do good in lots of other ways. I didn't actually think I was going to end up being a lawyer. I went to law school at night, put my own self through, working full-time during the day. But I wanted the hedge that would present. I'd work
Was
on
it worth
Capitol
it?
Hill, and I ended up loving my administrative law practice. It was this perfect blend of politics, public policy, and law. Administrative law is its own.
Do you miss it?
No, but there is a purity to it that there are times when I've written briefs while I was on the council, actually, where it was like, this is pure unto itself. It's not messy, and my political life is often messier because, oh my goodness, there's all the drama and all the emotional energy that goes with it because it's hard work.
Is it hard to know what the right course of action is sometimes?
Well, to me, it is. I don't live in a black and white world. And for me, nuance matters. And so it is trying to find exactly this is the right spot. So on the county council, sometimes kidded as being the person who tries to find common ground. I served on the board of an international nonprofit called Search for Common Ground for more than a decade, and that is in my DNA of trying to bring people together without sacrificing principle, but seeing if we can't pull people together and find the right sweet spot so that we don't lose people in the process.
Do you have any insight? And I'm going to go into left field for a moment here. Sometimes it's said that the middle child is one who brings people together and seeks common ground. Do you have any insight as to why you are the person on the council who tries to create common ground, why that's part of your personality? Do you have siblings, for instance, or is there...
I'm a middle child.
Really?
Yes, I'm a middle child. So that could be true. We all have our personalities, and my personality has sort of a peacekeeper kind of a portion to it, aspect to it. And so I don't like conflict. It's sort of an odd position to be in as someone who is in political life that doesn't relish conflict. I've got colleagues who really seem to thrive on conflict. I don't like conflict. I don't like ugliness. I like trying to bring people together and seeing if we can't work things through. And sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't.
To what extent do you think, I'm going to ask you to compare, without naming names, generally speaking, you with your colleagues as you perceive it versus as voters perceive it within this context. To what extent, and not particular to you, but just for political bodies in general, to what extent do you think you differ on policy with your colleagues versus personality? And then when you answer that, to what extent do you think voters make their decisions based on how you differ or are similar on policy versus personality? Do you think people vote for you because they say, wow, he's really a convener, he's very stable, he's the adult in the room, he convenes people, he's someone who makes peace? Or they say, gosh, his stance on energy utility regulation is excellent, bar none. So are people making decisions because they like your policy? Obviously, it's gray. But what do you think?
So I think it's a mix, of course. I think that there are people there that will say, Councilmember Roger Berliner, boy, he's been great for the environment, therefore I'm always going to be supportive of him. And there might be people that say, Councilmember Berliner, I really like the thoughtful way in which you do your work and finding common ground, etc. I can only tell you that in my own experience after 10 years, I do think how we do this work matters as much as what we do.
Process and outcomes.
Not just process, but how you conduct yourself in this. Are we bringing a positive energy to this, or are we also sort of caught up in the anger that exists today everywhere? And I really am struggling with all the anger that's out there. And how do we do this work in a way that rebuilds trust? I mean, here in our county, we just passed term limits by an overwhelming majority. What does that say about people's faith in local government? let alone what the national election seems to be conveying. So I do feel that it's part of our responsibility to listen to that and pay attention to that and ask ourselves, are we doing our work in a way that allows people to have confidence in government? Because when you don't have confidence in government, things really can go sideways. You can bring about authoritarian figures. And that has happened throughout history when people are faced with a great deal of change and don't feel like they can trust in their leaders. So that's not good. And so I really feel like we here in Montgomery County, we need to do our work in a way that people can trust.
So as we near the end of the podcast, I'd like to ask you to reflect upon your career in public service, both in elected office and in service of others in elected office, and in so many, the myriad ways that you mentioned. You've been doing public service. I'd like you to reflect upon your North Star. What is it that's driven you through all this? What continues to guide you? How do you inspire trust? What qualities inspire trust in others that you see? What really is motivating you, and why has public service been a calling for you?
Well, I sort of go back to what I said in the beginning and to why it's a call. I didn't know for sure it was a calling when I was young, like you, and worked on Capitol Hill and wrote speeches and wrote everything and wrote legislation. I loved it. So when I turned 50, I said to myself, isn't this who I am? I mean, you always have in the back of your mind when you're writing those speeches as a younger person that it's you, not the person you're working for.
You didn't realize that you were really someone like a public servant at heart until you were 50?
No, I just wasn't prepared to stand in it until then because I had a family, I had a wife. I had said to myself that this is a path, from my perspective, that actually allowed me to have a little more substance before I ran for office. There are many people who know right away that it's right for them and run. I actually believe that my path served me better by having the opportunity to be a little older, to have a broader range of experience, and then to know that this is a phase in my life, not my life. That this is something that will come and will go, and that I hope I do it well, as I've done my other parts of my life, and that that's enough. So my North Star is to do the right thing, and to do it as open-heartedly as I can. I think what happens to many people in public life is that it gets coarser and coarser, and in order to survive, you have to have a shield. And once you have that shield up, then you're less human than you were, and you can't do this work and be less human. You have to actually be more human.
Interesting. So Montgomery County Council member Roger Berliner speaks about public service in light of a very particular quality that is not frequently mentioned on this podcast, which is vulnerability. That to serve, you make yourself vulnerable, obviously in conspicuous ways to voters, to critique, to public dissection of everything that you say and do. But you make yourself vulnerable, willing to give up not only a successful practice, a different lifestyle in order to run, but when you finally have the thing that you want, that you feel is part of you, to say, I must make the right decisions in service to the people, and I must accept the consequences of my actions. And if that means that I am vulnerable to defeat and to leaving this exalted station in society, then I will do it. He speaks of service as something that courses throughout his life, but really understands the ephemerality of every phase in life. And with compassion and love, he dedicates himself to the service of the people of Montgomery County. Roger, thank you for joining us.
Jordan, it's been a pleasure.
And this has been episode 74 of Public Interest Podcast with your host, Jordan Cooper, where we interview politicians, activists, advocates, and others who seek to improve the state of the world. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you next time.